part of this presentation is actually recycled from what I presented 2 years ago, Marina. So like, I had to go through and be like, gosh, what's changed here and there. But what I'm going to do today, I think, is like introduce myself and run through real 101 in the field kind of stuff. So what's it like? What are your career options? What is it like working as a graphic designer? Real high level. And then just some, again, really high level, like you're looking for a placement, how to put the application together, how to put your portfolio together, just real easy breezy stuff. And then we can dig deeper on a Q&A if you're interested. But who am I? I'm Taralyn. Nice to meet you. Currently co-founder and creative director of my own independent branding agency here in Ottawa called BoldLIP. We're a team of about 7 creatives. There's myself, creative director on the design side. I've got a partner who's creative director on the copy strategy side. We've got a partner who's account services and client facing, 2 art directors, and a copywriter. So underneath this is a bit of my resume from past experiences and leveling back to like in-house or not-for-profit agencies, what kind of job it was. So quite a bit of history here. I've been working for 20 years. I graduated in 2004. And I became a registered graphic designer in 2020. At the time, I was freelancing. It was actually pandemic, lost my job at Canopy Growth, was freelancing, starting to build my own agency, and just wanted some credibility as I got my name out there to potential clients. Also wanted a bit of a community that I kind of lost in losing my job from Canopy Growth. And you'll notice like, is a lot to look at, but there's 2 jobs here that I got laid off from. So one was a small studio in Toronto called Big Image. That was in 2008 during a recession. Canopy Growth during pandemic also got laid off. So, it happens. But a little bit about me, a little bit more. I went to school at Durham College in Oshawa. I studied what at the time was a 2-year advertising program. And I came out of high school really not knowing what I wanted, but advertising seemed to offer a lot of interesting options. In the advertising program, I got to do, media and account services, but also the design stuff. Really gravitated toward the design stuff. Obviously, here I am 20 years later. 20 years is how long I've been at this. I started my first job off of my placement. That placement can be very essential and important as you start your career. So I worked for the in-house team at Yamaha Motors Canada. That's in North York in Toronto, and I was a designer. Amazing place to start my career. And my very first big on-the-job lesson is if you don't ask, you don't get. It can be pretty intimidating when you're new. You might not be given the juicy jobs. There might be things happening around you that are interesting, but you don't know how to approach. And I really learned to be uncomfortable with being uncomfortable and forcing myself into conversations I might not have actually had a seat at, just for my own personal growth. And my favorite job personally, other than my current BoldLIP job, was I spent a year working on a magazine called Muscle Mag, which was a men's bodybuilding magazine. I'll go more into working in editorial in a little bit, but the job was super fun and amazing. I love layout design. I love InDesign. I love type. And I love muscly men. So it was just a dream job. So career options. You're probably in school for design. I'm guessing you're all students at this committee. What are your options? Like, I'm going to graduate. Where can I go? So here's, a list of ideas of places you might land. An independent small agency studio like BoldLIP, perhaps, an in-house team, tech startup, publications, magazines. If you work in Ottawa, you might go government side. It's a real thing here. You might freelance work for yourself. You might work for a cassette or a big global agency. If you're in a small town out east, perhaps like a small town agency, or Ottawa is also a small town. You might teach. You could go work in a print shop. You could go gaming, exhibition, UX, event stuff. You could really just be an artist. Like, I'm really good at what I do. I'm going to just take it to Etsy or wherever. Not-for-profit web design, there are an overwhelming amount of options, but I'm going to walk through these ones, which I can speak to because I have a little bit of experience in my 20 years working in these 7 arenas. And we'll start with a global agency. Global agency is like the big cats, kind of like I think where every designer should, if they can, get a little taste of. I lasted 1 year in a global agency before I was like, nah, nah, maybe not for me personally. It's a lot, but sympathy. Global agencies are your like large multinational companies that provide creative marketing and advertising for global clients. So Kraft, for example, would be like a global client. Stella Artois, like big household names. So what's cool is you're working on these household brands, Cheerios, Delicia Pizza, like super fun brands that are fun to talk about, often with big budgets, big production budgets, doing big shoots. The other cool thing with global agencies is that there's always awards and parties. And so you're always just going out. It's super fun. There's a tight network. You get to know everybody. It's very, very cool. What's less cool about global agency and kind of like what kills off a lot of people, including myself, is that it is a ton of work. It's very hard work and you're kind of on the clock always. It's changing a lot, I think, with like a generation who's less interested in burning out, working to burn out. So I think there's the scales tipping on that towards the work-life balance, but still evenings, weekends to produce advertising is still in existence, I think, with the global agencies. It's also a pretty high pressure environment. A lot of them, want to be winning awards, want to see top tier creative work. So there's a lot of pressure to deliver that like really great creative output. So in summary, I mean, you're working with top tier talent, producing top tier creative work. And if you can find yourself, even for a year like me, in this kind of environment, you will learn a lot. So a step away from there, kind of where I'm at, this independent agency studio. So take your global agency, make it much smaller. I'm thinking of BoldLIP. We can work with our biggest clients, Canadian Blood Services, a national client, a big meaty piece of work, but we also do work for the local farm doing package design. So there's a little more variety in scale of client and also just style of work. You're often attracting brands that are like interested in their brand first and doing juicier projects. In my opinion, I think it's a lot juicier. You also get some more niche in the smaller agencies. So you might have a digital like web design agency or interactive agency. Our agency focuses on branding. So again, that's a bit of a focus, or maybe like an XM event space. So what can be challenging in this kind of career setting is that there's less rungs on the ladder. So for instance, I mentioned my team has 7 people, like, to become designer, art director, creative director, to work your way up. If you're interested in that, a little challenging when those positions don't actually exist. And it can be less secure, a little more volatile. And I say that having been laid off from the very first studio I worked at in Toronto. However, it can be great for the portfolio. You can get your hands on some juicy creative work. And I would say that's always great for the creative spirit. I threw this one here, so you might be at a small town agency, which again is like often going to be an independent agency. There's a little bit of like layover there, but my personal experience working at the big global agency in Toronto, and I moved to Ottawa at the biggest agency in Ottawa, which was still it was independent and small. But if you're from a small town, I think it works very differently than big city agencies, even big city independently run agencies. So what's cool about the small town agencies is that they often do a lot of disciplines in-house. So they might take on video production, web development, illustration. They'll have all those people, not all subcontracted, but at the table in the office. And there's a level of kindness and patience. I find that like when I moved to Ottawa, I was shocked at how kind and caring and patient everyone was with me as a newcomer. You might be working on less exciting brands. Again, I'm speaking as someone from Ottawa, so you get those B2B, you get the government work versus, that big global brand experience. Pro is that work-life balance. believe that strongly. I remember rarely staying late at the agencies I worked at in Ottawa, versus my friends back in Toronto who are, pulling midnights. So in-house creative team. So like I said, I started my career at Yamaha Motors. I worked for Canopy Growth. So these can be big companies that have a creative department. So what can be cool is that you can really own that brand and get to know it. So I could tell you everything there is to know about the brand standards for Yamaha Motors. After 5 years, that can stale out a little bit, but getting to learn how to really own and execute on a brand is super beneficial. Often with in-house creative, you're part of a larger corporation, so there might be better benefits in terms of like benefit packages. Or again, when I was at Yamaha, I had a pension, just absolutely unheard of. You're creating everything, you're at every touch point, which is pretty fun. And one and done, and by one and done, I mean, so I started my career at Yamaha. You would design the thing once, it would be approved. When I went into an agency setting, you're creating versions, you're creating rounds of versions, multiple concepts, and it was so foreign to me. I was like, can I just do the thing once and it's perfect? No, but often in an in-house environment, that's all there's time for. That's all there's really to care for. You're not creating everything. It's not necessarily a creative environment. That kind of sucks. You're often in a corporate environment. So if that matters to you, that could be a little soul sucking. It was for me. And like I said, it really does teach you how to own a brand system, and how to weave it across anything, which is pretty essential.
Is it possible to try a little more goldy color?
Oh, maybe I don't think that's for me. Okay.
No, I don't think so. Carry on.
I could add some gold. Okay, muscling through tech startup. Again, if you're in Ottawa area, if you're in Waterloo, Kitchener, there's tons of tech. They're all then like you might be the only designer on a big tech team. You're building brands from scratch. It's super exciting. So again, that ownership of creating something brand new. What's less cool is that the direction for the product might always be changing and you always kind of have to keep up. You might also be in a silo. There might not be any other creatives around you, which can sometimes be challenging. And tech startups can fail. Again, it's just a little volatile. And the summary here is that you're going a mile a minute working in a tech startup environment. And then they always say like, you're building the plane when you're flying it. So like you could develop an app, you could develop a whole website and then be done it. And they're like, actually, we changed direction on the product. So like tear it down and do it again. And it'd be a little demoralizing, but generally exciting. Publications editorials, like I said, that was my favorite place to be. It's predictable work. If you're like, I was on a monthly mag, so it's just like, what's coming. There's a rhythm to it. You get to play in Photoshop in a really fun way. You get to play with type in a really fun way. I had to leave the magazine because the compensation was so terrible. It was like, it just like literally didn't make sense. And I don't imagine that has changed years later, this many years later. But it's like truly a place to be if you're passionate. I'm sure, especially like, I imagine working for Food and Drink or I don't know, any like magazine that's meaningful to you, that would be, again, you're in it because you love it, not because of the beefy benefits. Freelancing, I think the stat is like 60% of all graphic designers will freelance at one point in their career. After I had my first kid, I left agency and freelanced solely for years, and absolutely loved it. It's flexible. You get to work where you want, when you want, and you get out what you put in it. So at a big global agency, I'm working 16-hour days. I'm still making the same pay, but if I'm a freelancer and working 16-hour days, I'm making my money by the hour. So, you get out what you put in, which is kind of nice. There is hustle, there is irregular paychecks. Again, it can be fairly volatile if you're not finding the work out there. So there's a bit of freedom, but there's a cost to it there. I've got more. I'm gonna skip through the roles, but I can share this with everybody because what I want to get to actually is really just like what you do after you've graduated, which is kind of a little bit of advice from so we've hosted placements the last 3 years. And I've hosted placements before. So this is again like a bit of learned advice. But how do you find a job? You're graduating. Placement is such an essential place to start. So if you are in 3rd year, if you're going to be looking for that placement in March, I recommend scouting now, like where you imagine going and where you want to be, and make that list, and then go to LinkedIn, go to Instagram, and start following those companies, following those creative directors or hiring managers, and just like, I see your, like, I'm a creative director, I own a small agency, I see your name. I see your name if you're a designer and following me. So like, it is just like a small hit, and now you know what's going on with that agency. Again, it's very high level. I think it's a really smart place to start. I said desperate times happen. I found my placement out of a bit of desperation. But a placement is better than no placement. Like if you're not getting your top, don't give up, don't not do it. I know some students opt out of the placement. I think it's an essential place to get some knowledge, even if you end up like at a print shop, you know. Experience is good. So please get your placement. And you never know where things go or who you might meet. So for applying, I would recommend, I get a lot of cover letters that are clearly written by ChatGPT, and I would really argue against that. They're really long, and I can tell they're ChatGPT. I would rather have a 2-sentence gobbledygook like message that's authentic and written from you versus 2 paragraphs of like articulate ChatGPT nonsense. So you won't stand out with ChatGPT. Be authentic, be yourself, let that shine through. An online portfolio, I would also say, is key, and like Behance to me is fine. Any like a link, just send me a link. PDFs, less so. No portfolio is bananas to me. So like make sure your work is online. And I would recommend your portfolio have at least 6 pieces. I would recommend, if you can, that one of them is not a school project. So like, friend with the band, can I do a poster for you? Or mom with Etsy shop, can I do your logo package? Whatever it is, like it doesn't have to be mega, but some client facing work. I think that's what's interesting to me, is somebody who's done like an actual brief, dealt with someone's actual demands. Like there's challenge there that would be worth putting in your portfolio. I say one showstopper, take one piece that you're really proud of and really flesh it out and really give it the love and care and make that the top of your portfolio and the first thing that people will click on. And then a few that showcase your style. And I think the style thing is like, will come out naturally, like, but yeah, that would be how I'd run that out. For the interview, so you've reached out, you've applied, your portfolio rocks, you're at the interview stage. To stand out in the interview is not hard. I'm gonna tell you this, it's not hard. If it's somewhere you really want to be too, you can land it with a few easy steps. So show up on time and be prepared. And prepared is really doing just an iota of research. Who am I talking to? What are they working on? What is this company about? Like basic, go on the website, basic stuff. If I've been following them on LinkedIn, reference their latest post, mention I've been following you on LinkedIn for a year. I love what you're doing, whatever. Like be prepared with some knowledge about where you want to be. You'll be asked questions, answer them all, even if you're scared. Just answer them. Some students are so scared they can't answer questions, and they will like literally just like no comment them. And it's scary and it's nerve-wracking, and that's okay. But to your best of your abilities, answer the questions. Follow up the interview with a thank you note. Thank you for taking the time. Really appreciated it. Really hope I have the opportunity whatever. I've had one student do this and she got the placement. Like it's the little things sometimes. And I would highly recommend having one question at the end. They'll say, do you have any questions? And you'll be like, I'm so nervous. Like, no, I don't have questions. Have one canned question, one question that reflects your knowledge of the agency. Hey, I saw you guys won this client recently. Is this your new direction, or how's the work going with them? Is that a client I would touch if I worked with you? Like anything. And then when you're on the job, especially in a placement, just like again, high level, what's expected. Demonstrating passion, I think through the entire process, if you can demonstrate some interest and passion or like excitement for where you're at, it goes again like a super long way. And like, oh, you're an energy that I want around. You're somebody that I like, you're interested in this work, you're interested in this agency or this team. You're probably somebody that I should hire long-term and beyond placement. Showing up on time and working the expected hours. Again, it sounds so rudimentary and basic and silly, but these are really the things that like we're testing you on in a placement for a full-time potential placement or job. Encourage you to ask questions. Again, be comfortable with being uncomfortable, putting your hand up. If you've got a brief, I spent too many years, I'm gonna tell you, I spent too many years of my early career just being scared to ask questions because I thought like, oh, I should understand this brief or I should know what's going on here. Sometimes the brief doesn't make sense. Sometimes we use acronyms you might be unfamiliar with. And asking questions is always okay. I would rather you get the clarity you need and have me slow down my process so that you can catch up and do the project correctly than spin your wheels for a week because you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. Ask questions. If something's not making sense, ask for the rundown. And then pay attention to the brief. And when you're doing your design work, just always bring it back to the ask and be able to explain that as best you can. And that's a skill you'll develop over time, but essential, just your thought process. So I designed this thing because I designed it real. I did it really flashy because the client wanted it to be exuberant and fun and it's a party. So whatever, terrible explanation, but like, as long as you can speak to the creative work that you're producing and, you know, have that thought process, again, that's your goal. So my final advice would be to be adaptable. And I think this has changed in the last 2 years. And I think just as a designer, like I learned Work Express 20 years ago in school. ChatGPT came out last year and changed the game in so many ways. Like I learned Flash, like technology is just changing all the time, especially for designers and how we design and what's expected from us. Again, when I graduated from school, like social media didn't exist. Like the internet barely existed. I'm old. So, you know, those things come around and you've got to adapt and learn and be on your feet if you want to stay relevant and not be totally replaced by robots, which is like the goal for all of us. So remain adaptable. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions if there's time. I'm not sure how I did for time there.
No, you did excellent, right on time. Thank you so much.